Hey everyone, thanks for coming out today to our fifth OKC Snowflake meetup. This is our largest crowd by far, which is incredibly exciting. Before we get started, I wanted to invite Dan up from the OKC Police Department, government. He wants to tell you about kind of a new position they're looking at, and maybe he can tell you about that.
Thank you. I hope to learn something about Snowflake, but honestly, I have no idea what that is. But there's probably a lot of stuff in police work that maybe you guys don't know about. But what I want to tell you about is about a year ago, I kind of went on this path to create this position within the police, actually within the city, with the goal of having it in the police department. And what we're calling it is a business intelligence specialist. And we want to use data. We have a whole lot of data that we collect. I mean, literally millions of lines of data for CAD calls or computer-aided dispatch, all this stuff. We want to be able to use that better. And so what we did is we created this highly technical position from law enforcement. It's a highly technical position, maybe not from the way you guys look at it. We tried to give it a competitive salary, and we did it. We got it accomplished. As of July 1st, it's an official city position. In fact, my friend here, Lee, actually occupies the position in Public Works. And so now we want to have someone occupy the position in the police department. And so it's like, in my opinion, it's super exciting because we're going to be using data in new ways to really look at how the departments run, to be more efficient, but also at some point look at crime and how we can reduce crime through data. So to give you an idea, we have crime analysts within the police department that analyze crime. That's their job. And the way this position is written, none of those people are qualified to sit in this chair. So it's a little bit higher technical job. I'd love to talk to you about it afterwards or at any time. I can give you business cards. I have job descriptions. Answer any questions you might have. I don't want to take too much of your time on the front end. But I'm here because I'm trying to recruit for that position before it opens up. So we'll open it up for about 2 weeks. But I would ideally like to have someone picked out that I know is going through the process to sit in the chair. So I'll give you tours of the department, show you what the data looks like, all that good stuff on the front end, and figure out how I can get this out there to try and recruit. So thanks for your time. I don't know if you have questions, ask me after so we can keep going. Okay, excellent.
Awesome, thanks Dan. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, I'll try to be loud. If I'm getting too quiet, let me know. Also, throughout the presentation today, ask questions, jump in. That's what we built this for. If I just go through it, we'll probably run out of, or I'll finish too early. So let me know if you have questions. So who here, and I always like to ask this, who here is currently using Snowflake at their job? Whoa, that is a ton, okay. And then who has never used Snowflake at all, has nothing with it? Okay, right on, cool, so a good mix. Today, with it being so close to Halloween, I thought it would be a good time to open our visualization survival guide for the zombie apocalypse. This content is not up right now, but here. After this, I will deploy it to OKC Snowflake 5. This is our pattern for getting content out to people. We don't want you to have to show up to take part. So we have a GitHub repo that has all of our content from our last 4. It follows the same pattern, just use the bit.ly. And you guys can check that out, follow along. It's all pretty self-service. And we now try to record everything, so you can share this with your teams. Okay, so another question. Who has played Left 4 Dead? Anyone play this on? Yeah, my man. Okay, cool. It's okay if you haven't. This is a zombie game. I played a ton of this in 2011 timeframe. You're 4 survivors in a zombie apocalypse, and you gotta kill zombies and get out alive, right? And that's kind of what we're gonna do today. So I have been bitten by a zombie. I don't have much time. I need to get you guys this information I have before I turn so that my team can be successful. And the members of my team are Coach, the BI developer, Rochelle, the DBA, Nick, the data engineer, and Ellis, the project manager. I think kind of no matter what you're doing with data, you may fall into some overlap of multiples of these roles. And I'm going to give tips for each one of these people for doing BI on Snowflake. Some of this is going to be not really Snowflake specific, just good advice for working on BI. And other things are going to be Snowflake specific. I should make it clear that these are my evidence-based opinions, but still like opinions. You could validly have an alternative view on this, but I didn't want to have to hedge throughout the whole thing. Like, I think this is good advice for most people. But ask questions throughout. So let's start here with Coach, our BI developer. 3 major things for the BI developer to know. You should know your tools, because unfortunately there is no one great one for Snowflake. They all have caveats. You should decouple your dashboards during development. We'll explain what that means. And you should be iterating often. This doesn't really have anything to do with Snowflake. We're going to dive into what I actually mean by that. So know your tools. This is maybe, when I was developing this, I thought a lot of the people here are maybe in the BI world more firmly than in the Snowflake world, and they want to see how you can bridge that gap. I'm sure some of you are in the Snowflake world and trying to expand into BI. That's more where I come from. But I think this is probably the more important person to focus on. So what tools exist and what are their caveats? Power BI and Excel, they connect in really similar ways, and they're really cheap. You probably already have them. And I know a lot of BI people, you don't have a lot of say in the tools you use at your company. So this isn't so much about giving you the tools to pick which one you're going to use, but let you know what the roadblocks will be. So if you're on Power BI, here are the things to know. There is no single sign-on. That doesn't happen right now. There are hacky ways. I have made it kind of work, but it's broken. Which is okay, because SSO in general is kind of problematic on Snowflake for client tools. It's really affordable, which is a pro, but the publishing on Power BI, and I think this is almost disingenuous from Microsoft, you can connect to Snowflake that's fully supported from the desktop. But as soon as you want to publish anything you've done, which is the whole point, right, of using this, you need to have a gateway set up. And if you're in an enterprise environment, you guys probably have something set up. That's not a problem. But if you're using the Power BI like SaaS model, you will have to set up a VM that holds the connectivity details of Snowflake, because the SaaS deployment like platform of Power BI just doesn't have a concept of the Snowflake connector, can't connect. This is a huge pain, especially for a company my size, where we are using like the quick to deploy methods. We don't have a full staff of people to maintain our Power BI instances. Other issues are that basic things don't work. I couldn't get Power BI to figure out that materialized views are a thing you can query in Snowflake, which is a huge miss, because that's what a materialized view is for. It's for your BI. And for live connections, basic calculations don't work. So maybe I want to concat 2 strings, first name, last name. You can't do that on a live connection using the Power BI DAX. So a lot of things are missing here, which is a pain. You can get around it with like view definitions or custom SQL, but I mean, that's kind of antithetical to the proposition of Power BI. Tableau, okay, what's the problem with Tableau? It's expensive. It's really kind of expensive, especially when you have to pay for everyone who possibly might view your dashboard. That's kind of a problem for me. There are also some weird bugs in the connector that are kind of hard to figure out unless you want to get into logs. Time zones is a really good example of this. I found that Tableau will display my time zones in one time zone, my timestamps. But then when I click to like do a filter on a table, it will query in a different time zone. So I could have a data point that has 2 points, and when I click it, and when I see raw data, there is no raw data. That's such a weird bug. I got around it by using like just untime zoned querying, but that's something I shouldn't have to do for a really expensive tool. SSO does work, but you can only use your default role. So this is a Snowflake thing. Roles are your permissions. And say I am a sysadmin of some kind, and I have my accounting BI views and I have my sales BI views. I need to not use one or the other. I need to build a higher level permission structure that is my default to see either one of them. And now I'm responsible for deciding what warehouses to use when. And now your compliance goes way down because it becomes hard to stay in compliance with your broader stuff. So SSO is problematic. But Tableau, and this may be controversial, this is one of these opinions, it is by far the best dashboard development experience. Power BI, I don't have a problem with it, it's good. But if you are looking to seamlessly explore your data, I encourage you to at least try Tableau for free if you haven't used it, and then choose for yourself. But it's expensive, so I use both. And then maybe outside of the more enterprise-focused world, some up-and-comers, Sigma Computing, there are a lot of online-based BI tools that you could go and get. This one, I think, has the best chance of owning the Snowflake market because there's no installations. Your people on Windows 7 in the manufacturing site, they can still connect to this. They just have to log in. It's seamless. The sharing is seamless. The integration with Snowflake is incredible. No weird bugs. I do a lot of data engineering in Sigma because the caching that happens on Sigma side makes everything really, really fast. But dashboard development is really painful, which sucks to say about a BI tool. I have to know what I'm looking for before I build it, which is really a small fraction of the valuable pieces of a BI activity. I should be looking for new questions I don't know to ask, not answering questions I already have. And then Metabase. So this one, for the more adventurous here, or maybe the more scrappy startup, this is what I like to use a lot. It's free and open source. It's Docker-based, but you can deploy it in a jar. You can put it on the cloud or on-premise. And it is a BI tool. It has SSO integration. I set up SSO with our G Suite, so I sign in with my Google account. I can run it locally on my laptop, so if I'm doing a demo somewhere that doesn't have the internet, that's completely fine, as long as I have the data cached, right? So, and it connects to Snowflake seamlessly. I really enjoy Metabase, but you have to maintain it, right? This is no longer a fully managed thing. They have an enterprise offering I don't know anything about, so you can check that out. But if you're okay with deploying a Docker container and keeping a database running, this is a really good alternative. No. Okay, so the next piece of advice for the BI developer, decouple your dashboards. And this is maybe against what the traditional advice would be. What I mean is use custom SQL. But the pattern of that should be select star from whatever your table endpoint is. And you might wonder why that's not going to do any manipulate. This is the same thing as just connecting. What this gives you is, and I see this a lot, say in Tableau, you build a dashboard that uses a field called timestamp. And you build some calculations based on that give you just the hour or just the date, and you have a production use case that's in deployment. And then your DBA decides, well, timestamps in UTC, and we're not really making that clear to people, so we're gonna change this column name to timestamp_UTC. Your dashboard will break. It's broken now. So if you just connect to that table, there's no way around that. You need to manually go into your dashboards and update all the calculations and all the actual views that are leveraging this column, where if you're using this approach from the beginning, the select star, you can just alias timestamp_UTC back to timestamp, and you won't break your dashboard. You shouldn't do this like for very complex transformations, but it gives you a little breathing room to update to production changes, and you can A/B test to make sure it's all the same. I've had a ton of headaches with this, particularly in environments where we're exploring. We don't know what the end format's going to look like. So this can save you a ton of time. This is a pro tip for Snowflake and some other stuff too. And then the last step, and this is something I'm super passionate about, is the lean cycle. In BI development, I think it's really common to think, I need to optimize for answering questions. I need to go find as many answers as I can. And that is a limited way to look at BI. Unless you already know your business incredibly. You're just coming in to do a set amount of things and you're gonna go away. You already know all of it. More likely, this is exploratory in nature. And your users are maybe not you, like they're different people who maybe don't even sit with you. They're in different areas. And maybe you don't have any real concept of what they're trying to do. I emphasize this so heavily because you need to build, measure the response. This often means getting with a user, having them use it, find out, without talking to them, does it feel intuitive? How many clicks do they have to do? Does this help them solve a problem or change behavior? All of this data engineering work, this whole ecosystem of tools and jobs that we talk about when we talk about data engineering, it relies on this going well. Because if this doesn't, and no one who can make a change can understand the insights you've built from your data gathering, your data cleaning, your pipelines, buying something like Snowflake or even on-prem Teradata or something like that. If this part doesn't happen, then it's just theater. You're just doing it to do it. No one actually makes any money or does anything valuable. I would encourage you guys to look deeper into this, and this is good advice for most people working in environments of uncertainty or innovation. And then optimize for spinning this cycle faster. Those are the things you need to get out of the system. That's where your PM can help a lot. So these are the big things for the actual BI developer to understand. Your team will need to communicate though, because when you're on Snowflake, you can't just do all the hard stuff, all the work in the BI tool. You need to talk to your DBA. This is usually the main interface until you're actually developing on something, because the DBA is kind of the gatekeeper to make sure access is secure. A manager could also be in this role, because they're also going to be thinking about price concerns and sustainability. Making it, this is something I am passionate about. You can't have one charismatic leader, cult leader of your data infrastructure, because things happen. They get other job offers. People like that tend to leave. And if they're the only person who knows and you have no structure, then you're in trouble. So 3 major pieces of advice for this DBA or manager position. First, you should use dedicated warehouses. This is a different way of thinking on Snowflake. So Snowflake, they're bad at naming things. I think I can say that non-controversially. Snowflake is a data warehouse. That is a platform. Within it, the units of compute are called virtual data warehouses. That's super confusing, but it's a concept you'll have to get familiar with if you want to really leverage it. So you need to use dedicated warehouses for the individual things you're trying to do, because you will save money and get better performance overall. Sizing warehouses appropriately is also really important, and knowing how to do that as a DBA. And you should use service accounts. This is maybe a little controversial, but I believe it firmly. Some of your enterprise environments maybe say you can't do this. You can't have passwords, no usernames, all SSO, it comes from a good place, but I'll explain why it's problematic right now. So initially coming into the Tableau world, you may think, well, we need our Tableau warehouse, we need our Databricks warehouse, we need our accounting warehouse. You may need things like that. And this is perfectly normal if you're going to buy hardware and you have your accounting database, you have your Tableau service database, those kind of things. That's not the world we live in anymore. There is no cost to having 20, 30, 40, 100 warehouses that are used for dedicated purposes. It's actually a lot better. The reason is Tableau warehouse. How big should that be? We don't really know. So what's the heaviest load that it'll ever have to do? Okay, so we make it big enough to handle that. And now the small things are using way too many resources. Or the other way around, we just pick something small, and a lot of the jobs, they're too big for it and they delay everything else. If you guys have worked in any Hadoop worlds, this is really common, where you have a prod cluster where some data scientist is doing some crazy querying and they bring the whole thing down because it all runs out of memory. And your production workflows that do transformations, those are broken now too. And it would have been really nice if we could have just had those in separate environments. That's the value of having separate storage and compute and letting you do this. So shift your mindset away from Tableau warehouse or Databricks warehouse. Do project-based scoping of your warehouses. So Tableau security warehouse for monitoring your security environment, Tableau operational efficiency warehouse, sales KPI warehouse, and then like Databricks revenue prediction warehouse, not just dev. You can do a dev warehouse, that's fine, but I find Databricks dev warehouse has a way of just becoming the Databricks warehouse. The general pattern I recommend, and it's a little like jazz, like do what's right for you, but I like a format of who_what_warehouse. You may have to break that down. Maybe security has some really high-end dashboards and then some lower-end stuff. So you have security monitoring and then security reporting. Like these could be different things. One's real-time and one is like an end-of-the-week thing. You'll have to break that up for what's right for you, but consider this as an alternative approach, because at the end of the day, as a DBA, someone asked me, why are we spending so much? The bill's crazy, what's going on? And if I look at my breakdown and I see, well, half our credits go to Tableau, what does that mean? Is that worth it? But if I could say, well, the Tableau operational efficiency warehouse, that one is just spiking right now. Why is that? Do we have more users? Should we talk about a different way to store it? You can target your efforts much better without having to do additional work. It's very hard on Snowflake to suss out individual users driving costs. So let your warehouses be the description of that. Next, how do you size a warehouse? There are 2 major ways to do more on your warehouse front. The first is to size it up. So warehouses have t-shirt sizes, extra small, all the way up to 4XL. And each time they double the amount of computers in the back end. So extra small is 1, small is 2, medium is 4, and it goes up that way. If you have a single query that is taking forever, sizing up the warehouse will typically help. If you have tons of people hammering a warehouse, that is not the best way to address it, because you still have a single bottleneck of processing individual operations, and things will be less efficient. So it might be valuable to think, my warehouse is keeping people slowed, and it's currently a small, so it has 2. Should I up it and give it 4 nodes, or should I multi-cluster it? This is the other approach, where I have 2 individual instances of 2 nodes. The ultimate cost is the same. You're paying for 4 computers, but the needs are different. The 4-node jump up, that's going to make your complex queries or massive amount of data without much parsing ability, not much pruning, those go a lot faster. The 2 individual 2s will handle lots of heavy load from multiple people. So if I'm doing a demo, right, and I want to give a dashboard link to everyone here for you guys to play around with, and I know that a small works really good for me, should I up the size of that warehouse to make sure it doesn't slow down for everyone, or should I multi-cluster it? Multi-cluster, yeah, exactly. Because there's going to be higher concurrency from different people. And then I can auto-scale that back down. So these are the 2 general reasons why you might want to do this, but it's important to know the difference, because you could spend a lot of money just trying to make your small be a medium or an extra large, and you won't get many results, but you'll be spending a lot. But how do you know whether it's a performance issue on a single query or whether you're getting lots of load? Snowflake, this is actually one visualization they do really well. In the warehouse tab, if you click on a specific warehouse, you can see the load over time. And in the bottom part, there's like a little scanning window. You can extend that window and see specifically what components of the delay go to what part. The blue is most common. That is going to be actual execution time. So if you see tons of blue, execution time is your bottleneck. You probably need to scale up. The gray is provisioning time. So that's how long it took to actually get the warehouse together. If you've ever tried to fire up a massive one like I have, that can take a long time. That can take a couple minutes. So you'll see that there. The yellow is what you want to look out for. This is queued time. So Snowflake will check as a query comes in whether the resource that you want to run it on, the warehouse, has enough cycles to do it. And they make some guesses on it, try to estimate how much work it'll take and how much work is left. And they'll queue things rather than overload your actual warehouse. And if you see a ton of queuing time, this is a concurrency issue. Go ahead and multi-cluster. That'll fix it. That'll iron out the yellow pretty easily. And this is easy to look up. The next part, and I'm sorry for all the text, but I have a lot of thoughts on this. Snowflake SSO has a serious flaw. You can only use the default role, which I brought up earlier. Why is this an issue? This means that I have admin access to basically everything at Hashmap. I don't log into anything as an admin. There's a reason. I have Butterfingers, and I will drop something on accident, and I trust that if that's something I shouldn't do, I won't have the privileges to do. So I drop to the least level of privilege I need for basic exploration, so non-admin stuff. That's a good security practice. But my default role needs to be very high if I want to cover all the different areas of BI or single sign-on capabilities that I can see. Otherwise, I'm on that low provision role and I'm back and forthing with SSO and changing my default account. This is a huge miss by Snowflake. I cannot imagine they're going to let this stay this way. But back to the Power BI thing where they say they support Snowflake, but kind of not really. They support SSO, but I don't know anyone who's serious about security that would consider this an acceptable implementation of single sign-on. So your company compliance that requires SSO is probably to encourage better security standards, when in fact you could be hurting yourself by blindly following that in this case. It really leads to habitual use of highest privilege access. I thought that was a really cool way to say that. So what do you do instead? We go back to service accounts. It's the same stuff we've been doing since the 70s, where you have some user account with your username and password. Your other users do not have passwords. You can remove them. They have to sign an SSO. You know who's who. But if you go from developing a dashboard where you can do SSO just for exploration, you're still going to be too high privilege, but it's contained to someone who maybe is allowed to do that. When you go to production, change the credentials to the actual production use case service. Follow the same rules as the warehouses too. And this is why. My security Tableau dashboards are authenticated with my security Tableau user that only has access to my security BI views and can only use, not alter the size of, but can only use my security warehouse. So when my management asks me how much are we spending on the security demo stuff, I can tell them exactly, and I don't need to spend time on it. Actually, I can so readily tell them that I have scheduled dashboards from Sigma that hit our Slack channel every week on Fridays, because I was tired of getting that question. And then you can tell me what's worth it. Do we have to buy more credits? Do we have to shut some stuff off? Maybe our trainees should know a little more before they get full access to things. I think that's probably the approach. But this allows you to move fast and not break things, even though it seems like an older approach. Does this make sense? This is one I really, yeah. If they fix the SSO thing. So if I go to Tableau right now, I do single sign-on, I give them the URL to my Snowflake account, and I type in just my email address. I'll click Enable SSO, it'll open a browser, it'll say you have this default role, and you're gonna have permissions granted to Tableau to use these things. I click OK. If I go back and can suddenly change my role, or even if I can use SQL, because I've tried to use custom initial SQL to change my roles that I have permissions to, the SSO still blocks it, which is probably appropriate because single SSO to a bad actor, even though you logged in as some viewer, but you have access to the account admin role, that's good practice. But they need to have some ability in the OAuth to list the roles you would find acceptable. And you can couple it that way. Okay, maybe a little in the weeds, but if this gets fixed, I'll let you guys know. Because I don't like passwords, I hate them. Okay, the data engineer, Nick the data engineer. Who here is a data engineer? Okay, a sizable representation, but a overall minority of the group. That's what I thought. When I first started writing this, it was all for you guys. And I had to take a pause and think like, no, there are gonna be other people who don't just care about data engineering. I'm not gonna tell you how to do your job today. I'm only scoping tips to BI work, which is maybe a little different than your day-to-day stuff that you're normally focusing on. 3 big tips for you guys. You should know how to build your analytics tables. And we're gonna talk about different words for this because I think people like, I don't know, if I'm a consulting company, maybe I come up with a cool buzzword for analytics tables. I call them Hashmap tables, right? Those are cool. They all mean the same thing. Let's get past that. And we'll talk about good practices there. You should know your table types because Snowflake has a couple esoteric things, little exotic stuff that is cool. But initially you're like, why would I ever use that? That's dumb. And then the query profiler. If you guys don't know about the query profiler, I'm about to hand you like a golden treasure because it's incredibly powerful. It comes out of the box, and it's the kind of thing in the old big data world that I killed myself trying to get done. Okay, first thing, analytics tables. Data marts. Anyone use the data mart terminology or hear it thrown around? Analytics tables is what I personally use because it's what the hipster boutique consultants call it. That's cool. DBT, if you guys use DBT, they call them analytics tables. And then top tables. This is something I heard pretty common in Houston, in oil. They call them top tables. I think that's kind of cool. But they're all the same thing. These are the tables or views or like structured data targets that your BI tools are going to get to. This is really important. It's a thing you didn't really have to think about in the operational world. In an OLTP environment, you're going to normalize because it's all about maintaining data and writing data efficiently. The read, especially for like OLAP style queries, that's not really a concern. And that's why we're not ever going to replace any of those systems with Snowflake. Snowflake is specifically built for OLAP. Online analytical processing, don't quote me, A is analytical. And that is going to be more concerned with low latency, not having to do tons of compute, redundant storage, which is a traditional DBA's nightmare because if you have to update one field, it's not just one place now in a normalized world, it's everywhere. But the trade-offs are really worth it in a BI environment. The denormalization process. Normalizing is a formal thing. I hear people talk about it like, well, we're going to normalize your JSON. Okay, you just mean you're gonna like flatten it, that's fine. But if you tell that to like some veteran DBA, they're gonna laugh you out the door. That's not what normalization means. So denormalizing means we're gonna flatten things, we're gonna redundantly store stuff, and we're gonna let the BI tool maybe do filters. But if they have to do any sort of advanced windowing, if they have to do any sort of joining at all, your analytics table, you're doing it wrong. Because you want the heavy work to happen at the warehouse, and you want it to happen before anyone reads it. You write it once, and you read it many times. That's the way you do it. Avoid variant columns. This is a much more practical tip. Variant is it can be like a string or untype, generic, but it's also the column type of the JSON structure in Snowflake. That's one of the really cool parts of Snowflake is that you can process JSON. I do a lot of ETL with that. But Snowflake will not do any kind of partitioning or indexing or clustering, whatever you call it, on a variant column. So if I filter by state that's nestled in a location variant, I won't automatically prune out every other state and get good performance. It'll look through everything. So when you're building something for BI consumption, it's really important to talk to your BI developers to understand what the query patterns will be. And if people will only ever look at one region at a time, pull that region out, make it its own column, because then you'll prune your data and only have to scan the chunk that has that specific region. There are lots of other examples. Another kind of cool tip is to use partial row hashing, or sometimes all row hashing. Imagine that you have a large comment section. This is popular for like an Amazon data set where they have reviews. If you have a specific comment that you want to pick out from there, it's really, really hard for Snowflake to efficiently compare two massive comment strings. That's just a hard issue. But if you hash these values, instead of comparing a massive string of very large size, you can compare a long value, right? Or a unique identifier. And every time you get that input, you'll get that same output. Then you can handle collisions. I think they're going to be really unlikely unless you have billions and billions and billions of rows. But that can be more efficient. So an example of why you might row hash, instead of comparing zip code, well, zip code could be alone, but instead of comparing city, state, and country, you could just hash those three, and instead of checking that all three are the same, you can check that one single value and you'll get the same information. So this is kind of a data engineering trick. And then always store more data to save warehouse credits. I find often for data engineers, it's natural to be like, I don't need to store this another way. I already have it stored. If they want it, they can just grab it. A filter will be fine. That's no problem. What you don't see, though, is that while your storage goes down, your compute is going to go up. And people will be reading this data in general for analytics stuff many, many more times than you will write the data. So optimizing for maybe a faster write to save a little storage means your overall spend is going to be greater. The response to your BI tools will be slower. And that doesn't help anyone. So if you have the same data that needs to be viewed 5 different ways in 5 different dashboards, store it that way. Storage is incredibly cheap on Snowflake, and you're going to want to optimize for that rather than making the warehouse just do a little bit of extra work. And then these are the major table types that you'll want to know about. Views, I think we're all pretty familiar with views. These are not stored objects, not stored data, but they are collections of instructions to compute underlying data. The real point is like when you hit them, additional compute will happen under the hood, even if you're just doing like a select star. These are really, really useful because they're cheap to build. I don't need to build a data pipeline of transformation and scheduling to have a view. I can just define a view. The performance can be worse, but for development, for that lean cycle, early on, I don't want to optimize for a table transformation with a robust pipeline that's been tested and scheduled for a table that no one ends up using. It's a lot of work and you don't really get anything out of it. So start with views as data engineers. My instinct is to always build a more robust pipeline. I just want it to stream and be continuous and be tested and be really efficient. But the overall efficiency of the project or the process, that suffers for that. So that's where you think of views. Materialized views in Snowflake, they are not very good. There are 2 main things I hate. They're really limited. So you can only define a materialized view today on Snowflake based on one underlying table. So the major use case I see for materialized views, materializing the result of a join, you cannot do. So why do I have this? Why do you have this service? That's like the #1 use case. The one thing I find it kind of useful for is if you have data landing in from like a REST API and it's JSON, a materialized view can expand that into a wider table and you don't have to build as much infrastructure. The reason you would want a materialized view is, unlike a normal view, materialized views, they do save the data. So that join will only happen once on it. It'll keep that updated. And then all your reads will be very efficient. They'll get the same performance as a normal table. They're really cheap to build as well, but they're expensive to maintain because they run. And if you have high churn on your source table, you're going to have high compute to update things in your resultant table. The other big issue is that in your billing statement, how we're focusing on data warehouses as a mechanism for grouping cost, all materialized views are billed under the same line item. You cannot like comment it or give it a name. It's the same thing. So if I have 20 or 30 of these bad boys running, and at the end of the month I see that like our materialized view cost is out of control, what do I do about that? Now we're going on a wild goose hunt to figure out which specific materialized view is contributing to this cost. That's insane. The maintenance of this is untenable. So that's where materialized views are. I largely avoid them right now. Table, we all know the table. There are a couple major types of tables in Snowflake. The differences are how much metadata do they store for like that time travel stuff. So the big thing on tables is you can do time travel, which is cool. Typically, they require more complex transformations. You'll have to actually build a scheduled process to take source information, compute it, filter it, do whatever you're going to do, transform, and then save it to this table. That'll need to be monitored. That may need a dedicated warehouse, so your transformations should also have these. And that can be a lot of work. So you want to do the views until you know the actual format of the output data is worth seeing. People will use it, and it's not going to change that much. And then you can go back to save money by getting the operational cost down. Maybe you can bump the actual read warehouse to a smaller size if it has to do less work on read. The three major types, there's a normal table, there's a transient, and then a temporary. I don't want to get too much into them. The big part to know about transient tables is that they store way less metadata about changes. It doesn't go back 90 days. So if you have high churn coming in, you can use one of those, especially if it's a landing zone. I always recommend using a transient table for landing data because you almost always will transform it immediately and then never come back to the raw stuff. That's a really good use case for that. And then clones. Clones are a new thing in Snowflake. A clone is like a fork of your database, so a snapshot in time. But it's zero copy, meaning as soon as I define a clone on a specific table, it exists because it's not duplicating the data, it's setting a marker in the metadata of the log of what changes on the table. So you can compute on it, you can alter it without impacting production workflows. This is usually discussed in a dev environment, like your data scientists want to build something that you alter and you can't just throw that into production. But in this environment, so say you have a table that is updated every minute. You have continuous streams and tasks that update it. Your warehouse caching, every time a query comes in, if underlying data has changed, it will flush the cache and try to load it, and that can be very inefficient. If you clone your table without having to build like a bifurcated pipeline where you have the real-time flow and then the non-real-time flow to help caching, if you just clone it on a schedule, that's a very lightweight way to define a table that won't churn so much. So even just every hour, you will have that warehouse cache stay fresh longer, and it won't incur any additional storage costs on you because clones are instant, they just happen. I really recommend this for people who they have different needs, so that monitoring versus reporting. Monitoring may need to be real time, so you're gonna have to scale up your warehouse, and you're gonna have to have that cache get invalidated, that's okay. But your non-monitoring, your reporting warehouse that will take a snapshot of something every hour and distribute that to the bulk of your users, that can save you a lot of money and it can make things very fast. So the point is, understand your use case, talk to your BI developer, make sure that when someone says they want real time, I hear this all the time, we need real time data. Yeah, okay, but this data source doesn't come in but once a day. We need it real time. Well, I'm not gonna build that. So how about we just build it daily? And if you have a problem, you can talk to me and we'll iterate fast. That requires a little bit of trust, but it's rare that I see people actually need real time. They just need it every 5 minutes. And even that alone, going from real time to 5 minutes can save you money. Yeah. I personally, because tasks are really hard to monitor in Snowflake, that's the mechanism for doing scheduled runs of things, including stored procedures. You could do it in stored procedure, no problem. And schedule that stored procedure with a specific warehouse. It's gonna be a little more expensive. And then tasks, they will bill at the warehouse level, but it's really hard for me to ask, like, how many tasks do I have running right now and build a dashboard out of that? There's no table to hit. You have to log in and like manually ask for that information. I'm working on something for that. I personally really like an external scheduler. So if you guys like use Control M, you use, Airflow? The Python scheduler? I don't use it that much. I use Lambda functions a lot for my scheduled activity with the Python SDK for Snowflake. So all you need is some regular way to schedule it, and it won't need a big warehouse. I actually don't even think clones use a warehouse. Some operations won't take any compute. So you won't even spend compute to get this clone up and running. You just say create clone as select star from table at, and the at keyword lets you define a time. So you could even do like comparisons where you can do 24-hour differences in the same query. Does that help? Cool. And for the microphone, the question was, how would you actually implement a clone approach, like to automate that? Cool. Good question. And then the last part is use the query profiler. This thing is a hidden gem, and it should be like a bright red flashing light on this platform. It's one of the coolest parts of it. So every time you run a query, each query gets a unique query ID. And you can click on that and come to this profile page from the history, where you get details of what was actually run, the specific SQL that resulted there. This is valuable if you are using like Tableau. And you clicked on something and it did something really slow, but you don't actually know what SQL was executed, what's the bottleneck. You can come in here, look, without going into the Tableau logs, you can look at the last query executed by your specific Tableau user, service account, and you can identify the specific SQL that went in. And I'll tell you, it looks like junk. It's like computer stuff. The Sigma stuff is a lot prettier. But you can identify in this profiler what was the major bottleneck. This is a question I often have as a data engineer. Did my weird windowing function come out really inefficient? Does my regex really take that much compute? Or is that just how long this takes? Is there just that much data? That question can be really easily answered by clicking on this profiler. It'll show you the steps, what percentage of the time was spent in each step, what row count went from step to step, and it'll tell you what specific kind of activity was happening. So in this case, this is hard to see, but on my join, I see that it was entirely CPU bound. 50% of this was on CPU. I also see that I have 60K records coming on the left side and 140K on the right side, totally manageable, and the result is 42 million records. Okay, so if I'm trying to improve this, maybe there's a predicate I can involve, a filter, before the join happens. Maybe I don't actually need to compute this aggregation across a join for all time. I'm actually just looking for the last month. And that little thing can reduce that 42 million down dramatically. And if you're compute bound, less data will result in less time. So now you can identify where it makes sense to actually put your efforts rather than like trying to come up with the perfect regex that is a lot more efficient. I'm terrible at regex. All my regexes are bad. So I try to just prune that data as much as possible. But another side of the coin is, say I come in here and man, this query is slow and I'm doing almost nothing to it. Like this is just a select. Why is it taking so long? There's no join. And I can see, oh, it's not process bound, it's IO bound. It's taking forever for the data to load. If I perfectly eliminated all processing on a 95% IO bound process, I'll only improve the speed by 5%. That's not worth my time as a developer. I need to decide where I put my efforts. I could instead decide to store the data in a different way that lets me use a predicate on it. So maybe the variant column is a filter I'm using. I need to get that value out. Date times especially are really popular filters. Get those out. Maybe even break them out by month as well, because that's a lot easier to index. There's just like an infinite number of tips here, but it allows you to know where to put your efforts, including like, I need to keep this warehouse on, because the cost for individual compute is the same as if I just kept it on all the time, except it would be a lot faster if I did that. So you're able to make more informed decisions about how you architect your pipelines. And then Ellis, the PM, the project manager. I originally had written this presentation with only 3 roles. And fortunately, the game has 4 characters. So what am I going to do? So I was just going to say, and Ellis is the PM, and then ignore it. But that's a disservice to the role of a project manager. I have 2 pieces of advice. Is anyone here a project manager? You don't have to say. No, it's okay. No, seriously, I like project managers. I have 2 pieces of advice for you. And I'm not going to go super detailed, but you need to be either uncovering problems or removing problems. If the activities you take part in, the rituals, the sprint planning meetings, the retrospectives, the stand-ups in the mornings, if all this work isn't in service to either uncovering a problem that the team doesn't know about or removing a problem for the team, you're just doing theater. You're just doing agile to say you're doing agile. I know a lot of agile coaches that say you got to do the retrospective, you got to do the sprint planning, and then every individual Kanban, like the backlog, it never gets smaller, it always gets bigger, and you just keep moving the undone tasks to the next sprint over and over and over. And it's a lot of friction, a lot of work, but you're not getting anything out of it because you have the same problems, including ones you didn't know about, and they're not getting better. So, PMs, do agile, do whatever framework you want to do, make everyone do a trust fall, that's fine. But you need to be doing it to either uncover a problem or remove a problem. And if you're not doing one of those things, I suspect you're wasting time. Cool. And this really isn't a BI thing, but particularly in BI, because we're so focused on these really hard problems and like trying to find out what actually would matter for a user. This is hard. If that cycle of lean iteration, build, measure, learn is bottlenecked because at build, you have to manually deploy your processes. A project manager should be able to identify the need for automated deployments, put it on the backlog and prioritize it and express it to the management team in a way that says, yeah, we're gonna have to stop work on these specific features, but it will save us time. That's a good thing for a product manager to do. Project manager, product manager, I don't care. Okay, any questions? Come on, it's gotta be a question. It's not there. Anyone disagree with anything up there, or it countered what they thought? That's cool.
I have a question about, so you have the DBA as one of the roles.
Yeah.
Is that something you typically see, is that kind of your classic DBA becomes your Snowflake administrator? That's not the case for us.
Yeah.
Because they're in a completely different mindset, typically from the Oracle SQL Server role or whatever. And administering Snowflake is so much different.
Yeah.
Right?
So the question was, the DBA role, is that typical for a lot of the Snowflake engagements I see? Because Snowflake administration is rather distinct from traditional DBA roles. What do I really see? I like to call it DBA because I think the actual overall objectives are really similar. How do you allocate resources while respecting costs and keep things secure? I mean, I think these are really larger objectives. You have maybe some different levers to pull and maybe some more black boxes you can't do anything about. I would say they're similar. They're more similar than like an SRE role, site reliability engineer. If you guys, it's a new buzzword. It's someone who does automation and keeps things running like at Netflix, has backup plans, has failover, that kind of thing. That kind of administration, you could say you're a Snowflake SRE. That's totally reasonable. I think they're rather distinct. And that the Snowflake role, and this is what makes it so great, especially for enterprise people, you don't need to hire cloud devs to get a lot of value out of the Snowflake cloud platform. Your DBA can pick up the different pieces a lot faster than you could go find and hire a cloud engineer. So that's the way I think about it. And different places handle it differently. I think it is really important to have your DBAs close to the people who actually work on the platform, because then you get, I don't know what company you work at, don't tell me. But I have seen companies in town who the DBA team, they're the administration team, and they're separate from the actual data engineers or the data scientists or the actual BI developers. And they, from a perspective of command and control, will say, we have the Tableau warehouse, everyone has to use this. Not really having a full perspective on like, well, we're doing development stuff that is going to impact production performance. The CEO comes to look at a dashboard and they can't see it because some new data scientist is running some insane queries on it. They don't have that same perspective because it's just a lot easier to manage 4 warehouses. So that's a lot more of a mistake. And a thing I'm really fond of saying, don't look for technology solutions to organizational problems. You're probably not going to find them, or people will promise a lot and it's smoke and you won't know until after you sign the contracts. Yeah, but good, really great question. Semantic layers on top of Snowflake. This is a broader discussion. So that's a specific piece that I think about a lot. Why is discovery in lineage so hard across everything? Why is it bad? Why can I not just look at what data is available in my company? Let's start a startup, bud. I don't know. There are tools that purport to do it, but they seem to focus on weirder, different things. The thing that would be really valuable, and I see some hints at that, but nothing really like ready, is that you have your semantic layer. A semantic layer, that's, correct me if you're thinking of something different. To me, a semantic layer is like human English readable descriptions of the things in your warehouse. Like the column isn't like TS_UTC. It's like timestamp. And it's in the UTC format or Chicago time or like whatever. And for some columns, you could also, not necessarily just at a semantic layer, but you could say, yeah, this column's bad. Everyone who actually uses this info, they know that. The data engineer probably doesn't know that if they didn't talk to anyone, and the DBA didn't. So you spend a lot of time transforming this field that's actually trash. I've seen that a lot in laboratory systems. Like we just know at a certain level of confidence, this is all garbage, so you should just throw it out. A semantic layer can help with that, explaining what confidence actually means, especially from like SCADA systems. If you've ever seen like a SCADA tag and the confidence is 95. What? What do I do? Is that usable? Should I like flag? I don't know. It's a huge gap. And I think that's the next thing. Right now we're seeing a renaissance of ETL managed services. We no longer need to build these commodity pipelines to get data from A to B. We have really good warehouses. We no longer have to fine tune our Cassandras or our Hives or HBases to eke out essentially high latency performance or low latency, high performance of a latency intensive task on a fundamentally throughput design platform. But at the end of the day, you have all the clean data in one spot. You still don't have the solution for no one knows it's there. No one can use it. Most of our users use Excel. And if they knew this was here and it was easy to get to and easy to search for and easy to ask questions on, that would make a big difference to the organization. Again, you're just kind of doing theater otherwise. I feel good when I see a nice, crisp, performant, scalable data pipeline, but it doesn't make anyone any money. It's a really, really good question. I don't have a good answer. I wish I did. I think that'll be next, though, after the ETL, that someone will come about, they'll say, look, all the Snowflake cloud stuff, it looks the same to me. I have this plugin that'll connect to all of it. It'll store metadata about what you're looking at in some other high-performance database. You can comment on it like Facebook. You can tag an owner. You can set quality rules. Data quality is another thing that's not really being looked at efficiently. This is a huge opportunity space. We are in 1970s Silicon Valley right now for data warehousing. So if you guys have a little extra time, you want to do a startup, you really should. Because it's anyone's ball game right now. It's a good question. Does that help? Yeah. What do you think of semantic layers?
I mean, I see the benefits of, more readable formats. I also see a whole lot of and it's not constantly updated,
Yep. The first time a user goes to your semantic layer and is misled is the last time they'll use it. So how do you maintain trust and communication and cycle through it? People think they want a semantic layer, so a saddle, but really what they want to do is ride a horse. They don't care about a saddle. They need just the freedom, the ability. That's a Slack letter if you guys are seeing that. We don't sell saddles. It's really worth a read. But you need to focus on what the actual outcome is, not the specific mechanism of, yeah, this means timestamp UTC. Who cares? I agree. It's not worth it if that's all you do. Cool. Yeah, question, sorry. Yeah. Number one most costly is some version of the warehouse is on when we didn't know it was on. So that's either a task that runs every 5 minutes on a warehouse that doesn't turn itself off except every 10 minutes, or a misprovisioned warehouse someone forgot to turn off, or it's just a dev task. I didn't mean to leave it running. It's an extra small, but you blew through my budget over the weekend. That sucks. That happened to me. This presentation I did last week for security events in Chicago. The weekend before, I'm looking at things because that's what I do. And I'm like, we're going to run out of credits. We have a hard limit on our account. And if it kept going, I wasn't going to have enough credits to demo. What do I do? How do I investigate this? And this is how I know that tasks are really, really hard to suss information out of. I could see which warehouses were running. My training warehouse was the biggest one. What am I doing? Let me show you guys. So the next step here was going to be case study. And I wanted to show you an actual dashboard I have that I know is slow. So I like Bitly a lot. Hashmap, Snowflake usage. This is a publicly accessible dashboard I have on Sigma. Sigma is cool because it lets you do publicly shareable links. They're not charging me for views. So for demos, for a consultant, this is perfect. You may notice it says something kind of weird at the top here. This dashboard is slow on purpose, and it's because people kept bugging me about it. I know it's slow. There are good reasons for that. Really good reasons. But this little title took me a lot less effort than the fix for the slowness. So trying to be efficient. But it is slow. And I can see here first is the warehouse usage. This shows me that I had a huge training warehouse spike in the last 30 days. These are all rolling 30-day averages because we think of credits in a 30-day window. I have active pipes, and these are kind of like materialized views. Pipes are auto-ingesting data from a stage, either on S3 or Blob. That can sometimes push my usage, but if that were the case, then I would expect the Snowpipe kind of line item to be very high. That's not what's happening. Build time by user. This is really interesting. This is a hard metric to get, and this is really what drives a lot of the costs in this performance. It's not a direct credit usage because two people can use a warehouse at once and it overlaps. You're not double billed. But I'm trying to get a proxy for who's driving usage on the platform by taking the total cost of their warehouse queries that actually leverage a warehouse, adding up the seconds of that and using that as a proxy for who's using the most. The most is Snow Alert, which is my security platform. That makes sense because I had to do a ton of reprocessing for the demo. But the next one is system. That's weird. What is system? Why system? All tasks are run by the system. So this was an initial indicator that tasks are overriding. So I had to go in and manually look for tasks. There's no table to look at. You have to do like a show task at a high enough privilege, and there's no real way to find out how long it's been running, like that usage spike on the warehouses, that's really useful. None of that. I can just see currently right now what's running. And in the case of this, there was nothing out of the ordinary running. I had to go to the actual history logs and look up task start and task stop events to find out someone left a task on for a couple days and then figured it out before I did and turned it off. That is way too much work. So your question, what are the biggest kind of reasons that people overspend? This is the one. And the other one is improperly sized warehouses. So everyone's using the Databricks warehouse. You no longer have any flexibility, and you're going to scale to your hardest, highest heavy lifting use case. And then the majority of your use cases, which are more average, they're also going to be using way more resources than they need. There are little things as well to know about, like with a copy command. If you have a few large files in your stage for copying in, Snowflake won't distribute a file across multiple nodes. One file goes to one processor. So if I have one massive file for ingestion, that's common for a snapshot. So I have a 100 gigabyte file, and I want it to ingest faster. It might be reasonable for me to think, okay, I have an extra small warehouse. Maybe I bump that up to a medium. It'll go faster. It will go no faster, but you'll be spending the money. So just understanding the weird limitations of Snowflake will help. I can keep going on a lot. A lot of what I do as a consultant is around the cost, usually prevention. Like if I can get in with someone early before they make bad decisions around roles because they're confusing and there's not a good way to look at them. They give you a tabular view of a fundamentally network graph hierarchy. If I can get in early, that saves people a lot of money and a lot of time, and then they can stay flexible as needs require. Too many people think when I build the warehouse, I'm done, and that's the warehouse. These things are living and breathing. These are like code repositories. They change, so you should prioritize for that. I honestly could keep going on. Does that help? Yeah. Cool, good question. We have, I think, just a few more minutes. We can continue on the case study. This is slow, and I think a reasonable question would be, why is this slow? Let's check it out. And if you have other questions, please jump in. Like I said, I built this for questions. So if you guys are new to Snowflake, so a lot of the BI people who maybe don't regularly get onto the Snowflake UI, this is the main way people interact with Snowflake. And there are drawbacks to that, but it's pretty convenient. This is rather small, but I can look in the history tab here to see what things have been run. And immediately it filters for myself, but I want to see other people. I'm in my lower privileged RTE role. So I will not see anything that I'm not allowed to see. I'll see a lot of training monitoring because it's common for RTE. That's my job. My actual job title is RTE. I don't care. But I'm not able to see the service accounts because that's not something I guarantee should be able to monitor. I'm going to elevate my privilege, not to root, not to the account admin role. You almost never want to do that except for account things like setting budgets. But I will go to the sysadmin. And understanding this is really important to keeping costs under control and letting your things scale. This gets so confusing that it is common for an admin team to just say, okay, we have the one role, we have the one warehouse, and that's that. Okay, so now we can see many more activities, things that have happened. And these are a series of queries from Sigma, these like longer ones. And I can see the one that's taken the most time is a 43.5-second query. The specific, that's kind of a lot for what I know to be small amounts of data. This is the specific query that is built. It doesn't look like much, but Sigma has this nice little identifier down here. I think that's very cool. That's not a lot of information. So instead of just looking at the query, I can go to the query ID, which gets me to this profile page, where I can see the specific text that was executed. I could manually look through here for weird things. I think something's happening, but actually Sigma's doing something else. This is a good way to figure that out. I can see how long it took, when it came in, who was doing it. It's the Sigma Snow Alert warehouse. Snow Alert's my security and monitoring tool, including cost, with the Sigma Snow Alert service account. So you see, I practice what I preach. And then in the profiler, I can identify multiple steps. The first is a secure view step. This is because the data I'm accessing is not in my warehouse. This usage data, and it's a cool thing that Snowflake does, is exposed to you through a data share. Data shares are incredible, but you don't really get to control every little thing you see. Snowflake sharing this data to my account is their actual record of how to bill me. but they expose it back to me in a secured view, so I can't see anyone else's. Secured views are going to have performance impacts. Why have a secured view instead of just a view that filters out things I'm not allowed to see? Say you have a view that defines everyone's salary in the company, and then you define a view on top of that that filters out everyone who's not someone who reports to me. If I query for select salary minus a number, or 1 divided by salary minus a number across the whole table, I can look for people who will trigger an error on that because dividing by 0, even if I can't see their stuff. There are lots of tricky ways. If you just iterate through there and I can say, oh, the CEO makes this, or someone else, my competitor who, like my friend of me makes this much, and it's like $2 more than me and I'm pissed. So a secured view, it gets rid of the ability to do that, but in exchange you lose a lot of performance because it doesn't do the same amount of pruning because you can identify what is in the table that you're not supposed to see with the pruning. I can't, but other people can. Step 2, it's another secured view, so we may be doing double layers of secured view, and step 3 is where the thing I can control happens. At the bottom, maybe I can zoom this in. Let me see about getting this bigger. Okay, that's kind of good. So the first thing that happens is that I hit this process, and most of the time, 99.8% of the time is spent there. So if I were trying to get a more performant aggregator, I'm wasting time. It will not move the needle on this performance. All of it happens right here on this secured view. And of this, some amount of processing happens. So even if I could improve the processing for the secured view, I'd only improve things 6%. Most of it is local disk IO, and some amount is remote disk IO. So if I ran this query again, assuming data hasn't changed, which I don't know on a secured view you can even tell. So the cache may not exist anyway. Don't quote me on that. But if I were trying to improve this, I just can't hit the secured view. I have no control of that because it's a share. It's in someone else's environment. I can't do anything with this. How could I make this faster for people trying to read? Any ideas? Data engineers? I know you got something. Caching, good idea. Caching is really good. So because of the way caching works, 2 levels of caching: service layer caching, where your word-for-word query will result in a cache hit if the underlying data hasn't changed. I don't think we can do that in secured views. The other layer is that your warehouse stays on, which can be a little expensive for my specific use case because only sometimes do people want to look at it. So caching doesn't help me so much, but the concept of taking the data from where it is and putting it somewhere I can access faster, that's good. I know I don't need this to be live. I'm not going to make a second-by-second decision on this dashboard. I may make a day-by-day decision or week-by-week. So what if I have a scheduled task that it takes 43 seconds to run, sure, but it stores the data in a table or a temporary table. And then when I query that table, instead of this 99.8% bottleneck on a secured view, I'm hitting an indexed table. Sure, I am storing more, but I am saving a ton in actual warehouse cost. But I don't know if this is useful when I first built this dashboard. So what I'm describing, the scheduled, monitored activity to grab stuff, put it in a place, and if it goes down, I have to go look at it. That's work. It's a lot more work than just writing this dashboard is slow on purpose. So that's kind of where I'm at on this. If it gets used more, I will do that, or more likely I'll take someone who wants to learn Snowflake and give them a task like, hey, this is a thing you could do, and you could write a blog about it because we're always looking for blogs. That is how I would approach it. But you're exactly right. It's the same as like other systems. Like if the data takes too long to get, move the data closer. But I wouldn't have known that. What I would have done is thought, man, my aggregation of these seconds by user, that group by is really expensive. Maybe I can't do it group by user. I just do a sum. And then like I try to do over time, that might be better. What a waste that would have been. Without the profiler to tell me, no, 99.8% of your effort goes from just getting the data, and you get 303,000 views. Or records, that helps too. Like if I did a join and it exploded massively, I might be able to do a predicate pushdown of some kind. Does that help? Does that help this feel maybe practical? Cool. The warehouse stuff, if you guys wanted to like figure out how you should size your warehouse, the most hammered warehouse in our system, I can see on our account billing and usage, is the training warehouse. Let's see here. I guess I can't scroll down. I'm too zoomed in, but usually there's a pie chart here. I can zoom out to see it. right there. A full half of our usage comes from this training warehouse. It's probably like I'm violating my own rule. Training where you can't tell anything from that. Who's training? What projects? Like, can we attach this to clients? That's really hard. And a trainee may be doing lots of stuff that doesn't really count as training. They might just be writing a blog, or they might be giving a demo. I have a demonstrator warehouse, but not a lot of people know about it because you have a lot more control over it. The training warehouse cannot be scaled up by anyone, so I don't have to. At worst, they're going to run an extra small for forever, which can still be pretty bad on a 300 credit a month budget. And we're at 291 right now. We're maybe going to run out. So in the warehouses, maybe I can see if it's getting hammered so much and I want better performance out of it, what could I do? What levers do I have to pull? So in the training warehouse, you go to warehouses, you click on the blue part, and then I get this kind of usage. I could probably show you guys where that weird constant running was happening. Oh, here it is. Here's the tail end. This only goes back so far, but here's the tail end of what was happening. You can see I am what are the increments? Every 5 minutes, I'm burning 0.02 credits. I'm willing to bet if you multiply that out, it gets to 1 credit an hour, which is full-time running. And it was because this task that had been turned off was set to run every minute on a warehouse that only turns off after a minute of idle time. And you can't go below that with Snowflake. You could turn it off, but Snowflake will bill you a minimum of a minute every time it fires up. So basically, I should have just left this on if this was a real need. I see no real yellows in here, so I don't think I need to multi-cluster, but it's running at full peak capacity. What should I do if I wanted performance to improve? Yeah, bigger size. Yeah. Is that what you said? Yeah, cool. Great. So that takes us to 1246. Any final questions, anything at all? Yeah. Numeracy. Who here knows about numeracy? Yeah, a couple of people. Snowflake, they announced at Summit, which, this is a weird thing. Last May, I think, Summit or June, they announced that they were integrating this numeracy technology into the Snowflake worksheet, which is, honestly, it's awful. This is awful. This is a glorified text editor with no autocomplete. I can't put these things into folders. I can't search for content. I can only search by the title here. I can't share it with anyone. This is insane. What a huge missed opportunity. But don't worry, numeracy is coming. And they've been saying that since May. It's a product they acquired. It should be able to do, like if you use Databricks, like actual visualizations in here, shares, folders, permissions. I mean, you're talking Google Drive level stuff. Autocomplete, which will be really, really fun because I get so tired of writing it out. I have not heard anything. I like to think they tell me some stuff. Nothing. They're honestly more focused on getting Power BI to support SSO, which should be coming also. Yeah, what's up?
So we had a Snowflake demo, and they said maybe not.
No kidding. Yeah. You'll figure it out. I would like to think that I know a couple Snowflake engineers, at least well enough for them to show me that they're using it. I haven't even seen that. And it's weird because they had a bunch of really good features that have been in beta forever leading up to Summit. And in Summit, they announced like a ton of features, streams, tasks. I think Snowpipe auto ingest wasn't even like public GA yet. Tons and tons of features that if you wanted it before that, you just email them, they turn it on. And I thought, why would they do that? Oh, they want to have tons of announcement for Summit. And maybe they're thinking about an IPO. Maybe this creates a lot of buzz. And now I wonder, like, are they going to hold it for the next Summit just so it can be another round of buzz? Are there lots of features? I don't know that to be the case, but maybe. They have the data exchange, the share that I'm really looking forward to as well. Like I said, it is 1970 Silicon Valley for data warehousing. And if shares take off the way I think they will, there's going to be opportunities to add new services and change the way we think about our jobs. Cool. Good question. All right, guys, if there's nothing else, I want to leave you with our Bitly link one more time. Again, it won't take you anywhere. I'm really bad at Bitly, and I've made a bunch of like dead end Bitly links that I can't change, so I'm always careful to do it after the event. But Snowflake 1, Snowflake 2, 3, 4, all those will go to the content. You guys can look up the stuff from earlier events. Thanks. Thanks.